All right, it's time for our panel discussion here. So we have a little bit of housekeeping. I'd like to invite our panel of farmers up here. Moving the chairs up to the front. Please don't fall off. All right. Be able to see. Brian Hicks of Tracy, Kurt Trost of Wabasso, and Bruce Gilbeck of Lewiston. So what I'm going to ask all of our producers to do here is we'll just have them each introduce themselves, where they're from, a little bit about their farming operation. We're just going to have a conversation among the three of you, among all of you in the audience, and those submitting questions on Slido. This is just a conversation about all their experiences and nutrient management over the years. Between them, they have over 60 years of experience in this topic. So we hope to have a lively discussion, and please ask questions. I'll be around with a microphone to make sure your questions are heard. So let's start with our panel, and just introduce yourselves and tell us where you're from.
Hi, I'm Kurt Trost. I live about 75 miles to the northwest of here. My hometown is Wabasso, Minnesota. And I've been farming for 42 years, so that 60 years is a little bit off. But anyway, so I raise corn, soybeans, grandkids, everything like that. So probably the best thing are the grandkids. But in my corn and soybean rotation, we use cover crops. We're on about 2/3 of our acres are cover crops. We've experimented with different mixes, and basically cereal rye seems to work best. What we've had in the past is a mixture of radishes and clover and turnips and things like that. The problem I have with that is that, the corn, when we harvest it for grain, there's really not enough of a season left for it to get started. And when it does germinate, it gets about 3-4 inches tall, white, spindly. We harvest our corn and cover it up, and it just dies. The thing that we've had the most luck with is the cereal rye. With our fertilizer program, we put pretty much 100% of our nitrogen down in the fall with anhydrous, and we use variable rate fertilizer for the P and K, sulfur, zinc. And when we do seed our cover crop, going back to that, what we've been doing lately here is we broadcast it and then hit it lightly with a disc just to get some seed to soil contact. Because like I said, we're harvesting in October. There's not much of a season left, and we do need to get it germinated and get it going. Also, the benefit of a light disking is it breaks up that root crown. So in the spring, we'll go right back in and plant with no till. We do very little tillage on our farm. Pretty much, if we mess it up, we'll try to correct some of that with tillage. Otherwise, we try to stay off of it. Minimize compaction at all costs. That's a big thing for us, and try not to have that problem that we need to solve. Brian?
Right, thank you, Kurt. My name's Brian Hicks. My family farms near Tracy, Minnesota, about 80 miles straight west on Highway 14. We've tried everything. We've failed more than we've succeeded, it feels like sometimes. We've been involved with Jeff Strock at the University of Minnesota, Lamberton, with drainage research. And what we've learned is there's no right answer. Because right now in February, we've all got this plan, how we're gonna handle our nutrients. And the farmers and crop consultants here, we've got it documented, we're ready to go. And then we get to May 10th or 11th, just like we had in 23, and we have 9 inches of rain in a matter of 24 hours. And every plan that you had just gets thrown out the window because you have 10 days of sitting in the shop wondering what you're gonna do. And then you have to retool and rethink and replan how you're gonna get the nutrients out. We use anhydrous, we use urea, we strip till some, We use some cover crops. We use manure. We side dress with a coulter cart. We Y drop, and that's a young man's sport. I hate Y dropping myself. That's too much stress for an old guy like me. We consistently use 32% as our carrier for our pre-emergence herbicide. And then we also selectively use starter fertilizer with our planter. So it gets to be quite a detailed plan. And then in the heat of the moment, somebody pulls the wrong switch or does something, and then we realize at the end of the day, whoops, we got to figure out how to make up for that shortage we just created. So there's no simple answer to what we do. And as farmers, we're challenged with knowing what our soils and our environment is able to handle. We prove that with the drainage research, that Mother Nature dictates so much. We'll have water samples coming back out of the system that are beautiful, just beautiful, and we're storing water. Everything looks great, and then we get a big rain, and that rain flushes the system, and all of a sudden our samples are coming back too heavy with nutrients. So it's not a simple process. The one thing that I tell people when we as a family, as a farm, give these demonstrations and talks about what we do, the rest of society looks at us and they believe, right, wrong, or indifferent, that we're just throwing nutrients out there willy-nilly, and they don't understand that our nutrient costs can be $600, $700, $800 an acre, depending on what we're doing and the year. And that's real money. That influences grandkids' Christmases. So we have to remember to tell our story that we're not over applying, randomly just putting our nutrients out there. We all have a definite plan and a reason for doing what we do. And the one thing I've found to tell this story is that the soil is our factory. Those of us that farm, the soil is our factory. Just like if you're somebody stamping out Nike shoes, you've got a building, you bring inputs in this side, your leather, your shoestrings, whatever, and out the door comes a Nike shoe. Well, our factory is the soil. We put the inputs in, God gives us the rain and the sun, and our end product is the corn and soybeans that we harvest with the combine and then ultimately turn into cash to provide money to do it again next year and grandkids' Christmas presents. So people don't always grasp what we're doing, but that kind of helps them understand that, this is a process and there's no simple answer.
I do the same as these guys. Bruce Gilbeck, Southeast Minnesota, Lewiston. We're right on the Mississippi. Corn, soybeans, alfalfa, lots of dairy cows, lots of hogs, and a lot of turkeys. So we deal with all the wastes, if you would, that we turn into fertilizer. Try and utilize them the best we can with what we have, and try to do some cover crops. We turn those into feed for the dairy. We plant right back into those, typically either alfalfa or back into corn. See the hogs, those are the St. Charles farms. We get hog manure from Holden's. They typically incorporate it. And from there, we typically do corn on corn. So we fight a whole nother set of issues there. The true corn bean stuff, we try to minimum till or no till if we can. Vertical tillage is big for us. Try and knock some of the corn stalks down. We'll plant beans into that. The bean stubble, we'll typically vertical till that and plant corn. Next to the dairies are that's a whole other thing. Corn silage, A lot of manure gets applied. Um, let's see, turkeys, we got a lot of turkey barns by us, so that manure typically is applied in the fall, and we have to incorporate that some way. So we have found that vertical tillage works that in really, really nice. Um, so I don't know what else we got to cover. That's kind of what we do as a whole. So
Well, let's take some questions. We have a bunch coming in already, and I'll read them to you. And if all three of you want to answer, that's fine. And then I'd encourage you to keep that microphone close to your mouth so they can hear us on the internet. But have any of you tried seeding cover crops into standing corn at the V6 stage?
I don't think nobody.
No one. Okay. Well, let's get the microphone over. There we go.
I believe the earliest I've tried is R2 probably is it, and then we've had it flowing on, but you don't get the good seed to soil contact, and that's always difficult.
Have any of you tried broadcasting cover into corn at the R2 to R3 stage? Nope. More head shaking.
Yes, that's.
Go ahead.
Yes, that's what we have done when we have flown it on in the past, but these last years have been dry, last 3 years. So that's always been a concern is if you seed it and you don't get any rain, you don't get any seed to soil contact. So that is the earliest. It's a cost issue with the plane. It's a timing issue, getting the plane. And so we pretty much have went post-harvest.
Have you adjusted your applied nutrients up or down since implementing your practices? Brian?
With what we've learned on our farm, we have adjusted nutrients down. And some of that is due to nutrient placement, and a lot of it is due to nutrient timing. So it is something that we're able to accomplish. Can you repeat it year after year? Sometimes. We do a lot of tissue testing, and so that helps us to monitor what's going on and then tweak what we're doing to a certain extent.
I gotta say, since we've been working with the extension service, probably 6, 8 years doing side dress plots or nitrogen plots, because we're in one of the zones that's high nitrate water. We've probably reduced our nitrogen by, typically everybody's looking at 200, 220 pounds. We're down in that corn on bean ground, 130 to 150 pounds total, and still growing 240 bushel corn, 260, depending on the year. This last year was really dry, so we struggled at that, but, we've done a lot of side dressing and last year that was a big failure for us just from the fact that I switched most all our acres to side dress and, never rained on it. So that was a tough lesson, so you have to have some of your nitrogen up front, followed by some if you're going to side dress instead of letting most of it for side dress. And we can side dress with urea and anhydrous. And we do prefer anhydrous at all if we can all get across the fields, but southeast Minnesota, we have a lot of contour strips and really tough going. So anhydrous doesn't always work with that. So we end up doing some urea, and then you're subject to volatilization if it doesn't rain right away. So we try and coat it with NBPT, but who knows? I think that helps, but you don't really know. But it makes you feel better anyway.
Does anybody in the room here have a question of our panel? Just raise your hand and I'll walk over to you. Anyone? Nope. Let's go back to Slido then. What do you budget for the cost of your cover crop? Anyone? What or how do you budget?
Well, how I do it is I just, I'm buying cereal rye for $12 a bushel. And I use that. This last year, I have tried some winter camelina. We'll see how that turns out. And then you have your application, but I piggyback it with dry fertilizer so that it's really not an expense. And to incorporate it, I'd probably be doing something like that similar anyway. So roughly 12 to, I'd say $15 an acre.
Brian or Bruce?
I would agree with the $12 to $15 an acre, and like Kurt, what we've done is, blended the cover crop with the P and K, floated that out there, and then lightly hit it with a sulfur to get it incorporated. And that seems to be the most successful.
Yeah, we're taking our rye as a crop typically and using it as heifer feed. And we'll typically hold some back and we'll combine it. And we actually hold that seed back and we have our own spreader. So we just throw it in the spreader and go spread it wherever we're gonna put rye the following years. So that's always like kind of a 1.5 crop for us because we always take it as a crop. And then we'll spread manure on those rye fields and then plant another crop, whether it's alfalfa or who knows, sometimes corn silage if it's off early enough.
Here's a question for all of you. Do you have thoughts or maybe some advice for having conversations with farmers about reducing nutrient rates, assuming those rates are well above economic optimums? Any advice from any of you? Bruce?
Soil test, soil test, soil test, soil test. If know what your crop takes and apply accordingly. It's, everybody wants to, reduce, but if your P1s and Ks and your micros are low, you're gonna really hurt yourself. So those have to be right before you can start reducing, anywhere. We have reduced our nitrogen, but timing is, southeast Minnesota, I don't want to jinx myself. We typically get a lot of rain except for last year. So applied later, we can probably get by with less. I mean, we typically use 0.8 of a pound of N per bushel that we can grow on that farm is what we use for our number.
Brian? Kurt?
Well, I guess I look at it a little bit different. I mean, when you're dealing in a commodity, regardless of what that is, profits go to the lowest cost producer. So you want enough to maximize your yield, but not $1 more than it actually takes to get to that point. So, you soil test, like you say, you figure out what your expected yield is and you fertilize accordingly. I just don't think there's many farmers that are throwing on an extra $20 just to have the extra $20.
Brian, did you want to add into this?
I guess, what we've heard here is it's not in our best interest to just be randomly applying these nutrients. We have to have some scientific reason for doing what we're doing tied to economics. And, we've all since, your 60 years of farming experience, I think, is low, Tom.
Yes.
Because
I-
he's got.
I will admit
40,
it.
And we, between the two of us, we might have
Maybe
a little
160.
more.
How's that?
But what I've seen was the standard when I started playing the game. And then what little I knew when my dad was farming many years ago, we have all reduced the pounds of N per bushel of corn. And I'd say that's a dramatic reduction, that 0.75, 0.8. And it's huge. And that's how we got to look at it. We've got to look at this as an economic machine, and over applying makes no sense environmentally or in our pocketbooks.
We have a question. What nutrient timing changes allowed you to reduce nutrients?
For us, it's the side dressing, the multiple applications of N in particular, the variable rate of our P and K. That's normally always in the fall, so that probably wouldn't be a timing change. But it's the ability to go out there and spoon feed and place that nitrogen where the plant needs it when it needs it.
Bruce, Kurt, any thoughts?
Well, is it what nutrient timing it changes? Really none. Like I said, I had put almost 100% of my nitrogen on in the fall. I use a nitrogen stabilizer. But for me, it is an issue of shortage of labor that that has me doing that.
Let's go to our next question. There's a lot of funding available from state and federal sources. What do you think are obstacles to more widespread adoption of cover crops? Kurt, want to start?
I think the biggest obstacle is probably farmer perception. I know just in my own case, I've tried some, smorgasbords of seeds and in the fall in different ways, and I've had some failures where it just didn't take off, it didn't germinate, and neighbors see that, they're discouraged. They're not going to want to make that same mistake. I look at it, you just try something different. I think we have a system now that works pretty good. Late falls, it's a little bit harder to get the cover crop established, but otherwise, it's just trial and error and keeping at it. I think it's just the right thing to do.
Brian?
Probably the biggest obstacle, whether it be human or labor or whatever, is Mother Nature and frost. We have frost on the front end of our growing season. We have frost on the back end of our growing season. Our counterparts 150, 200 miles south of here don't experience the shortness of growing season that we experience. And so when we had the best case scenario for our cover crop was we had 08 beans planted when it was snowing out in April. We harvested those beans on the 28th of August, and on the 29th of August, spread the P&K and the cover crop and sulfured that mix in. That was a phenomenal setup for a cover crop. You couldn't beat it. Now, can we repeat that year after year? No, it's not repeatable. But time was on our side. We had a small timely rain, and we had heat to get that crop growing, and it was well established before we had a frost and Mother Nature shut her down.
I would say from our experiences, don't let it get too big before you try and plant corn into it. Or get it killed as soon as you can, because if it gets much over a foot tall, it's going to really hurt your corn, especially on a dry year like we had last year.
Any thoughts on grazing cattle on corn stalks? Any benefits of that?
Lots of cow
Bruce?
poop. Yeah. We don't do it, just we have too many probably, but I have one farm that I let a guy graze his cattle on certain fields. The challenge of that is that they're cow trails, and the compaction, you're getting some free manure, of course, but it's not evenly spread, so it's hard to take a value for that, and then it really gets bad if they put a feeder wagon out there, and then what do you do with that? So people do it, but it's less than desirable for us.
We'll check the room again to make sure no one has a question in the room here in Mankato. All right, let's go to our next question. How often are you testing manure nutrient content for those who use manure? Bruce?
Every time we spread. From the turkey manure that goes out, we test that, both before it gets piled and after, because they'll start piling turkey manure anytime now. And then the hog manure out of the pits, that always gets tested, and depends which pit it is, whether it's a finisher or a sow pit, depending on the rates, but we kind of know what's in it, but we always test it. And then the dairy pits are always tested every time they're pumped, basically.
I think our next question, you've touched on it a little bit, some of you. How many years have you planted cover crops, and could you explain some of the lessons you've learned? Have you noticed any changes to your soil condition? Who wants to try it? Bruce?
I'll give it a try, I guess. We've done it, I don't know if you can call it, cover crops, but a lot of times we're taking it for a crop, so, and then we're planting something right back after we take it off, so, but the years that we've done cover crops, back 2013 is when we started it, and that was a prevent plant year, and we put a lot of cover crops in then. So, those we just rolled down and, worked in. And I wish I would have never done that because I didn't know what I was doing, because made more issues for myself if I was just rolled them over, and that would have been a perfect seed bed the following year, but we thought we had to work it back then. But, yeah, anything else to add?
Brian or Kurt?
We've seen a definite improvement in the soil tilth and the soil health. And I'm gonna admit, we're not consistent enough where we do it year after year. So we'll have a really good experience and then something will happen and we'll wind up, well, we better run the ripper or do something to those corn stalks. And so we screw it all up. We're not patient enough to see it through. But there are definite advantages to doing it.
I think I've been using cover crop, especially on one field where we started somewhere between 10 and 15 years. And the reason why I started and we really got interested in that is because for a few years in a row, we had heavy rains and it would wash the soil, gullies in the soil, right down to the plow pan, wherever that would be, a foot deep, some places 2 feet deep. And I just knew that if we kept doing what we were doing, that farm would eventually be worth less. And I think that's Einstein's thought on insanity, keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so I knew I had to do something. And we first stopped the tillage and started using the cover crops after that. And we started as an experimental field where we used a disc ripper and then we used a chisel plow, and we just kept doing less tillage across the field until we got to zero tillage and planted right in it. And my son-in-law was out combining, and as he got towards the end of the field, he motioned for me to, come in and ride around in the combine. And what he was seeing on the yield monitor was the less tillage we did, the better the yield was. In fact, that was the first part of the first time we'd ever hit over 80 bushels an acre for soybeans. And that's been like 10 to 15 years ago. So that on just that part where we did more tillage, the yield was actually less. So that encouraged us to keep trying.
What do you think of variable rate nitrogen? Would you use it pre-plant or in season? Who wants to tackle that one? Kurt?
Well, I'm assuming it could work. I don't know. I don't use it. My fields are fairly consistent soil types. I don't know if I would change the way it is now. Like I said, I put my anhydrous on in the fall and I use a nitrogen stabilizer. I don't know if I would go to that system or not. I'd have to do some, I don't know, I'd talk to Jeff Fetch about it.
Bruce or Brian? Bruce.
We've got some variable sandy farms that have sand knolls in them, and we try and reduce the nitrogen there because we're not going to grow much of a crop there. So, but where it's, same soil types or similar soil types, I'd be struggling to, what would you variable rate it for? Would you variable rate it for the CAC, organic matter, or soil type? There's a lot of variables.
Brian, did you want to add anything?
We've experimented with variable rate anhydrous, and we like that. We have tried variable rating with our side dress applicator, and that's a little harder to measure and it's a little harder to come up with a specific VRT map that at least I don't see how we measure that particularly well, but I think it's a good option. It's the VRT anhydrous in my mind works well.
Do any of you plan to participate in the upcoming ethanol 45Z tax credit with ethanol producers? Are you familiar with it and do you plan to participate?
I am familiar with it. I haven't seen any rules, regulations, or anything like that on it yet, so it'd be impossible to answer it, but it is intriguing.
Let's go to our next question. What benefit do you see for strip tillage? Use of strip tillage. Kurt?
Well, one of the problems I have with my fertilizer system, or one of my concerns, is that you get a stratification. If you don't till it in, you know, where is that fertilizer? It's in, top 2 inches. How much of it is moving through the soil profile, and is it getting to the roots that need it? That's one of my considerations. So strip till might be a very good option on something like that to mix the soil more into the soil profile of the fertilizer.
Kurt had mentioned labor, and for us, we have a fair amount of labor, but the guy doing the strip tilling has got to be the guy doing the planting, okay? We like the strip till because you can reduce your nutrients. They're there in the strip. You get your tillage done. The benefit to erosion, both water and wind erosion, is minimized because you're leaving that residue there. There are a lot of benefits, but it's a balancing act. Not only is it the guy running the strip till machine, but that strip till machine has to be tended. So that's another truck, another semi, another tender. It gets to be a lot of manage at a time when we're all really focused on getting the harvest done.
There's some people west of us that do strip tillage. We can't with what we're doing. I call it the goat hills of southeast Minnesota, and to drive in the same track would be really tough on a contour strip.
Well, here's a loaded question for a guy from Extension. To what extent have farmers benefited from the on-farm trials conducted by University of Minnesota Extension? Some of you have been involved with on-farm trials. Any comments?
A lot of people talk about it and they ask questions and they'll ask what we're doing and they know I've been involved in it. So, we talk about it. So, the nitrogen rate is the big one. So, and we explain what we do, when we do it. And some people say, well, that won't work. And, it's all in your mind, I guess. You can make anything work if you want to. So, but it's just an education. It's another avenue to get the word out, if you will.
The experience that we've had on our farm is the scientific analysis of the data that we collect. I probably slept through all of statistics class in college. Just that wasn't for me. But the expertise of the data analysis and setting up the experiments and the protocol and procedures that go along with coming up with good data is very important, and the University of Minnesota is there to help. And I'm a fan of utilizing them for research.
Well, this is an easy one for me. It's been invaluable. I grew up in town. I really didn't drive a tractor until I bought one. And so I spent a lot of time, different programs at the Southwest Research Center. And I don't know if I could be doing what I do now without that.
Our next question, have any of you participated in carbon sequestration programs? Various programs, Bear among others. Have you?
Yes, but my son-in-law is doing all the work and I have no idea what he's doing. So
We have not.
We haven't. Typically, we wouldn't qualify because we're doing a lot of what they want you to do currently. So, and we don't want to limit ourselves to X number of acres have to be done this way, because when you have manure, and just like these guys said, a rainy event here versus there, and we got to switch the manure, and we can't be tied into that, has to have the residue left on top. So we can't tie ourselves up like that.
All right, let's go to our next question. I think we can figure this out. Weed control benefits, less herbicides or less expensive herbicides? Trying to figure out exactly what the question is, the questioner is asking here, but I guess just the benefits, less herbicide, less expensive herbicides and some of your decisions? Ryan? Why don't you take the mic?
Chemical cost and rates with the cover crop? Is that what you're thinking they're getting at?
I think so. With cover crops.
Well, I'm not sure if there's any real extra. Obviously, you'll, if you're going to terminate the cover crop in the spring, you would have, put some Roundup in there. At least that's what I would use for cereal rye. As far as the tillage system that we're using, or, you know, trying to get as close to no-till or that we can get, yeah, I think that's possible, but there's, when you think of tillage, there's two reasons to do tillage. One is to kill the weeds, and the other one is to dry out the soil. We have most of our fields pattern tiled, depending on the soil type, anywhere from 40 to 80 feet spacings. And once you use that to dry the soil out, and as far as herbicides, you know, to kill the weeds, makes a no-till system work.
Let's go to our next question. Have any of you used tissue testing and or soil nitrate tests to make decisions on your farm?
I have used some tissue testing, and that has been of limited use. A lot of it has to do with the weather. And so these past few years where we've had dry weather, I can tell you that nitrogen levels in the corn have been higher. And when it's wet, of course, it's probably lower than what we needed because we have lost some nitrogen.
Few years back, we started going after consistently growing 300 bushel corn, just picking out an area in the field and just pursue that. So in those areas, we were doing tissue samples every week and trying to learn what the corn plant was taking up, what it wasn't. The biggest take home is we weren't putting enough boron up front. We weren't putting any. So we've increased our boron rates, spread rates. We've increased our sulfur rates. So that's our biggest take home from tissue sampling, and having your potash levels where they need to be. And most people don't have them where they need to be if you're going to grow big yields. It's way more than that, just adding nitrogen to it.
Our next question involves drones. On top of soil testing, do any of you ever adjust fertility plans using a drone flight to use NDVI multispectral cameras to apply more efficiently? Anybody here using drones, Bruce?
We spray pastures with a drone, but we do the test fields. We've used a drone just because we didn't want some tire tracks from a Hagee in there, or so, but very limited. Most of the drones by us are used in pastures spraying graze-on.
Let's talk about soil health benefits. We've talked a little bit about them, or you have in the last few minutes. What soil health benefits have you observed on each of your farms with adoption of cover crops?
Well, I just, you know, the root mass typically is loosens up a lot of the top soil that we have. So the root mass is key, you know, and what's the right rate so it doesn't compete with the crop you're going to plant. But that root mass, you guys talked about erosion. We deal with that every field we have because we're on a hill somewhere with some slope. So erosion is huge, but that root mass is what keeps that soil healthy, in my opinion, and keeps the good bacteria living, and so it'll benefit your corn plant or bean plant.
Brian?
Kurt alluded to the importance of drainage, and without great drainage in our soils in Redwood County, Kurt and I are both from Redwood County, and this applies to a lot of counties in the state. Without great drainage, cover crops, conventional tillage, no tillage, whatever kind of tillage is really tough. So if you've got your drainage right, the cover crops just naturally fit in and work much better. And I see the soil, the soil heals itself. It becomes healthier. It becomes, the living organisms in the soil are much more vibrant, and there's just a lot of benefits to all of the above.
Yep, the biggest benefit I've seen is soil tilth. And then as a side of that is, stopping the erosion.
What percent do you reduce your nutrients when strip tilling?
I don't strip till.
And quite honestly, when we've done it, I'm not a part of the strip tilling, so I'm not exactly sure how they've handled
We don't strip till, but it doesn't make any sense to me if a crop removes X number of nutrients and you're gonna put, typically guys cut the rates of fertilizer in half. So now, and if your soil tests are low and you reduce your fertilizer in half, you really hurt yourself dramatically. So reducing your nutrients, if you're only spreading a maintenance level, doesn't make any sense. Even in strip till, you better put on your maintenance at a minimum.
Have any of you looked into carbon credits for your stewardship work?
We looked into it, we didn't do it.
We've looked at them seriously, considered, looked at the pros and cons, and we've decided it doesn't fit for what we're doing.
The carbon credits as in what? I mean, as like are using indigo, is that what they're talking about? Or is it
I would assume so. Yeah,
with indigo? Is that what you're?
I think so. Wouldn't you
Oh.
say, Joe?
We have, and we are utilizing that program. Like I said, it's just the first year for it. And my son-in-law entered all the data. I really don't know much about the program. No sense in duplicating the effort, I guess.
Have any of you used any biologicals? Any thoughts, return on investment?
I have not.
Brian or Bruce?
So I've got sons that farm with me, and they're of the younger generation, obviously, and they're willing to try a lot of these things. And we've had Source and Nitrogen one, Pivot Bio, and all of them. I don't see much of an ROI for us. It's not there yet.
We use a fair amount. Mycorrhiza bacteria is primarily what we're using as a seed treatment. It's also on a talc, so it's our planter box treatment. So all our corn gets that, all our soybeans get it. We've tried Meristem product. I think that's similar to Pivot Bio. It did about the same as the mycorrhiza. As far as when we're going across with the yield monitor, I couldn't see any difference. But we're not potentially reducing our nitrogen by 40 pounds like they're saying. We can we're at a lower rate of nitrogen to start with, so I don't feel comfortable doing that.
If any of you are abandoning your P and K, are you changing the way you do soil sampling?
I don't ban, so
We've done some stripping, but I don't think we've done it consistent enough to really change the way we sample. All our fields are gridded. We have points within the grids that we're sampling, and no, we haven't changed.
I don't use banding.
Okay. I'm not sure this is a question that any of you can answer. How long can urea stay on the soil surface without incorporating into soil? Maybe I should walk over here and talk to Jeff Vetch about that. Do you have an answer for that?
If it has a urease inhibitor on it, they usually say 2 weeks, but I'd say 10 to 8 days to 2 weeks is typical. Without a urease inhibitor, it'll all depend upon temperature, moisture of the soil and pH. The wetter the soil, the warmer it is, and the higher the pH, the more likely it's to volatilize. It only takes about 1/4 of an inch of rain to incorporate it though. So if you time it right and you want to gamble and not put on a urease inhibitor, but as one of our presenters up here on the right said, this spring was not a spring to put your urea out there and top dress it and not incorporate it. And even with a urease inhibitor, there were areas in Olmsted County that went 45, 50 days without 1/10 of an inch of rain this spring. So those were some fields that probably didn't do very well.
Now, surprising enough, we went probably 60 days as we were just where Dover and Yoda was. I mean, St. Charles just east of there, and I know it was all of 2 months after I applied my urea, it never rained. I mean, dews a little bit, but, and I was crying like a little baby about it and saying I'd never do that again. And, now I'm actually thinking about doing it again, but anyway, I, I, I watched the little pellets disappear and, my corn looked pretty tough, to be honest with you, especially the corn on corn. Now, it did have some nitrogen. I sprayed with 28. We use 2x0x2 with the planter, so it's getting, roughly 30 units there. And I sprayed with 28, so I got another 45. So it had some nitrogen, but I could see, it was almost knee tall corn and V5, V6, and it was running out of and it was drying. I mean, the corn was rolling during the day. It was really struggling, and I'm waiting for rain. I finally gave up. We put the NBPT on, and I said, I'm just going to spread it and close my eyes. So that's what we did. Never rain, never rain, never rain. And the corn actually started looking better. It somehow it got some of it. Now, the corn on corn, I ended up at about 160, 161 bushel for an average, which is way off from my normal on that farm, but I wouldn't bet it would have did 100 bushel, the way it looked. And on bean stubble, same amount of rain. We had about 3 inches throughout the whole growing season, and that farm did 181. So you don't lose all of it. It definitely is less than desirable, but you don't lose all of it.
Well, let's wrap up our farmer panel with one last question. And Brian talked about it in his opening comments. There's a lot of talk in the non-farming public about nutrients and nitrogen, and we're going to hear a lot about it from the legislature this year. What do you, as producers, what do you want the public to know about what it is you do, how you manage nutrients, how you care for your farm, how you care for the soil? What do you think, Bruce? What do you really want the non-farm public to know about what you do?
Well, I think they got to understand that we are educated, that we're not just throwing stuff out there. We're following as many rules as we can, or not rules, but suggestions from the extension service. Most everybody's went to college. I mean, I'm from the UW system in Wisconsin, which is probably better than Minnesota. I don't know.
Cut his mic.
I don't see any tomatoes coming there. You guys better duck. So no, I mean, we're soil testing, we're tissue sampling, we're doing the things, the best that we have today, best knowledge that we have today. And we're growing good wholesome crops and food for them to eat. So I'd be happy to explain exactly what we do to anybody that would want to come up and ask and say, we're not trying to pollute water or soil or streams, or we're trying to do things correctly as much as we possibly can. Now, with that being said, Mother Nature comes into that, and in our geography, if we get a 6-inch rain, we're going to lose some topsoil, and we're going to lose some nutrients to that. I don't know how to stop that, other than what we're currently doing, minimum till, no till, waterways. Other than that, we're doing what we can.
Brian?
So there is a stigma out there that we're just willy-nilly applying these nutrients, and we need to change that. And it's tough because it's such an emotional topic. But it's, you know, what we have to keep telling people is it's in our best interest to be good stewards of our soil, good stewards of the nutrients that we apply. And that, you know, that's something that people can't argue with. It's like, hey, it makes sense that they're not over applying because it's costing them extra money. You know, my mother drives my dad nuts. They live in Tracy. She wants a beautiful green lawn. Dave, you should fertilize the lawn again. 2 weeks later, Dave, you should fertilize the lawn again. It's like, mother, you're part of the problem. This extra fertilizer you're putting on doesn't help, you know, but there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect. And then Dave, complaining because he's got to mow the lawn so often. It's like, so no, it's all about telling our story. It's educating our kids. I've got kids that live in the metro area and they grew up on the farm. They picked rock. They participated in everything we do, but their friends are indoctrinating them that, oh, you know, that Roundup they spray out there on the farm, it's gonna get you. You know, it's continually telling the story, making sure that we're presenting ourselves in a positive light. And something we got to do every day.
Well, you know, there's the invisible hand that everybody works in their self-interest. And I think we're no different as farmers. Nobody really cares about our land as much as we do. If we take good care of it, that's our future. And I'd just like the public to know that.
We have a nice hand for our farmer panel today. Brian Hicks, Kurt Trost, and Bruce Gilbeck. Thank you all very much.